People who have been discussing the REDD issue for such a long time, and many times have been bogged down with the technical details, and many with views as to why this can't work. They would look at the agreement between Guyana and Norway, a developing country and a developed country, and would see within this agreement some serious attempts to address the concerns, that the very legitimate concerns, as I outlined before, that have been raised. And then they would say, if this could be done in a bilateral agreement, we surely can do this within a multilateral framework. We're going to probably agree to REDD, but we still have lots of work to do maybe over the next few years to ensure that all the concerns here raised are addressed in a substantive way. No one wants to give money to any country that is not performing or meeting its obligations. So I'm actually hoping that this would help in Copenhagen.
The lady at the front in the purple.
Marita Confesa, asking you in my capacity as coordinator of a studies program on the Amazon at São Paulo University, without meaning this as a political question, just as a technical question, how would your model transpose to an area so much vaster, in this case the Brazilian Amazon? Because in a sense it's a privilege to work on a more limited geographical universe and much more complicated to avoid seepage, etc., in the larger universe. That's one question. The second and last is, in Copenhagen, if you say, yes, it may not be perfect, but there will be a learning curve, how do you envision setting up a mechanism that really ensures and structures this learning curve? Thank you.
Just before you answer, I'm actually going to say, could we stick to one question only? I don't think it's fair for everybody to ask 2 or 3 questions at a time. Carry on.
Yeah. The way I see it, President Lula has announced that he's prepared to cut deforestation rate by 80% by 2020. I think this is great, and that the world should support this. Clearly, Brazil will need help to ensure that that happens. And clearly, Brazil will have to deliver results if it wants that help. And I'm sure that within the two, within Brazil's capacity to deliver, or its need to deliver, and the world to provide the finances, we can cut the deforestation rate in Brazil. I think we don't have much time to lose here. We need to really, for us to get to the sustainable trajectory as defined by the IPCC, emission levels have to peak by 2015, maybe maximum 2020. If we don't do something now, deforestation rates are going to continue. The greenhouse gas emissions are going to continue along the business as usual trajectory, and there would be no hope of achieving 450 parts per million, much less 350. So I think everyone has demonstrated that we don't need to develop the technology now to address forestry. It's a low-hanging fruit, as everyone is saying. If we have the will and we're prepared to provide the resources to deal with this issue. The informal working group has come up with this interim financing for REDD, and they have pointed out that you can cut 7 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2015 for 25 billion euros. That's 5 billion per annum. That's by 2015. And that works out to 1.5 cents per person in the Annex 1 countries per day. It is not unaffordable. So I think we need to really put a lot of energy, because if everything fails at Copenhagen, if we're not going to get renewables deployed at large scale, if we're not going to get major fuel efficiency standards, if we're not going to get major movement on transport, then where are we going to start cutting emissions? And it can only come from the forestry sector. So I think we have to make this work. And we have to do it in an accountable, transparent way, where countries have to demonstrate that they're performing, and then they get help if they're performing. So I think it can work in Brazil too. I think President Lula has made a earth-shattering, basically, declaration in saying he's prepared to cut deforestation rate by 80% by 2020. You talk about the structures. I think part of the structures that we need to build are reflected in the MOU. A transparent financial transfer mechanism where you have audits of funds so that the money is not stolen. Secondly, a rigorous MRV system so you can monitor any change in the forest carbon stock. These are two critical elements of that system, and of course the indigenous people's rights and multi-stakeholders participation. All of those are essential part of the system. But the first two, I think, would answer the major concerns of most countries.
And are you convinced that they're really in place in Guyana?
Well, we are putting this in place. That is why I took a little issue with what you were saying. And this, don't take this in any way. Don't take this in any way, because we're having a friendly chat here. Maybe not so friendly when some others raise this issue. But you've highlighted illegal logging. And yes, there is illegal logging, but illegal logging takes place in some cases because of weak administration, but because you have real people needing they need to eat. Take, for example, Haiti. All the trees are gone because they needed firewood. The government didn't support this. It was all illegally done. But that's restating the problem. We need to look for the solution. This MOU is just the start. We're trying to build a system that will prevent illegal logging in the future, that will first of all track it, identify it through remote sensing devices, and then take enforcement action. But what do we do with those people who need to cut firewood or need to earn a living? We can't say to them, starve. So the money has to be spent on creating alternative employment for them as part of our LCDS. We've said for every indigenous people's village, we have to create 2 sets of activities. Use the money to, 1, food security, and secondly, some sustainable activity where they can generate income so they don't have to cut trees anymore. We have to focus on education, healthcare, maybe bringing in more fiber optic cables so that we can do ICT related work so the young people wouldn't have to go to the trees. We still have 40,000 people who depend on the forest directly through mining and forestry. We have to, over time, find alternatives for them. So it's restating some of the problems. And with these credit rating agencies, we had a discussion before. But maybe we need to do due diligence on the credit rating agencies. And I hope that the NGOs who are here would start paying attention to this. Because when you're a developing country, they just dismiss you. I was pointing out the Doing Business guide that the World Bank produces, the IFC. The IFC, if you introduce social safety nets in your country, marks you down because they say it affects labor market mobility. On the other hand, the World Bank, which is part of the IFC, which is part of the World Bank group, urges you to put in greater social safety nets for people. The World Economic Forum, the indices that are used, if you're number 1, the largest economy in the world gets the highest point. So guess who gets number 1, becomes number 1? The United States of America.